Hello students, welcome to the lecture on training and development, and after the lecture we will be able to learn the following objectives. Explain the management practices, describe the importance and objectives of sound industrial relations, define the SIRS at the national and industry level, understand the sound labor relations at the enterprise level. Let's start with a brief introduction to industrial relations. Industrial relations are used to denote the collective relationships between management and the workers. In the words of Lester, industrial relationships involve attempts at arriving at solutions between the conflicting objectives and values, between the profit motive and social gain, between discipline and freedom, between authority and industrial democracy, between bargaining and cooperation, and between conflicting interests of the individual, the group, and the community. According to NCL, industrial relations affect not merely the interest of the two participants, labor and management, but also the economic and social goals to which the state addresses itself. Labor relations should be seen as an essential part of management systems and techniques and not as a discipline or activity apart from management. Let's now learn about management practices. According to Taylor, the worker does not possess creative ability, let alone intelligence and wisdom. The elements of a human-oriented management system which promotes sound industrial relations such as communication, consultation and participation found no place in the theory. This is reflected in the classic strategy structure systems, the 3 S's, of modern cooperation, widely expressed by 2 writers. Structure follows strategy and systems support structure. Few aphorisms have penetrated Western business thinking as deeply as these 2. Not only do they influence the architecture of today's largest corporations, but they also define the role that top corporate managers play. As explained by Barrett and Ghoshal, in this concept of an enterprise, top-level managers see themselves as the designers of strategy, the architects of structure, and the managers of systems. The impact of the 3 S's was to create a management system which minimized the idiosyncrasies of human behavior, emphasized discipline, focus and control, and led to the view that people were replaceable parts. We will now study industrial relation theories and attitudes. The focus on relations external to the enterprise, especially through national and industry-level collective bargaining, was initially welcomed even by employers in several industrialized countries because it reduced competitive advantage based on labor cost. The workability of a system of industrial relations in which the emphasis was on decisions outside the enterprise presupposes a high degree of literacy, education and awareness among employees able to monitor the actions of their representatives operating at a level or removed place from the workplace. A more pluralistic view recognizes that labor problems or issues do not relate only to conflict between employers and employees. Organizational behavior has been influenced by psychology, which centers on the individual, and by social psychology, which focuses on relationships between the people and on group behavior. The environment external to the enterprise should be facilitative and at times protective in the sense that it needs to prescribe certain basic standards relating to such areas as social security, safety and health, freedom of association, weekly and other holidays and rest periods. Hierarchical managerial systems and respect for authority, which have mirrored the external social system, have been inconsistent with consultation, two-way communication and even with the concept of negotiating the employment relationship. Employers as well as some governments are viewing labor relations from a more strategic perspective. That is how labor relations can contribute to and promote workplace cooperation, flexibility, productivity and competitiveness. Let's learn about international factors. The internationalization of business, intense competition and rapid changes in technology, products and markets has increased the need for economies and enterprise to remain or become competitive. Technology is already facilitating changes in organizational structures so as to create flatter organizations. This has resulted in less management by command and supervision, in more emphasis in cooperation, information sharing and communication, and in a more participative approach to managing people. Many countries are undergoing a process of industrial restructuring, which in some cases include privatization of public sector undertakings and technology upgrading. This process has resulted in several social consequences such as redundancy, all of which have sometimes strained the relationships between the employers and the workers and unions, and between the latter and the government. Many countries have witnessed the emergence of workforces with high levels of education and skills which need to be managed in a manner different from the way in which employees, especially blue-collar employees, have hitherto been managed. Even manufacturing companies are becoming essentially assembly firms, and many service organizations now act as brokers, connecting the customer with the supplier with some intervening advice. As a result of intense competition for goods and services and the recognition of the enterprise as an important engine of growth to an extent unknown in the past, the center of gravity of industrial relations is now more than ever before the workplace, and managing human resources is now receiving the attention it should have been given much earlier. We will now discuss about sound industrial relations system. A sound industrial relations system is not capable of precise definition. Every industrial relations system has to take into account and reflect cultural factors. Systems cannot change culture, but only behavior within the cultural environment. A sound industrial relations system is one in which relationships between management and employees and their representatives on the one hand and between them and the state on the other are more harmonious and cooperative than conflictual, and creates an environment conducive to economic efficiency and the motivation, productivity and development of the employee, and generates employee loyalty and mutual trust. Industrial relations seek to balance the economic efficiency of organizations with equity, justice, and the development of the individual, to find ways of avoiding, minimizing, and resolving disputes and conflict, and to promote harmonious relationships between and among the actors directly involved and society as a whole. Industrial relations operate at different levels: at the national level, at the level of the industry, and at the enterprise level. At the national level, industrial relations operate so as to formulate labor relations policy. In market economies, this is usually done through a tripartite process involving government, employers and workers and their representative organizations. At the industry level, industrial relations often takes the form of collective bargaining between the employers' organizations and the unions. This process may result in determining wages and other terms and conditions of employment for an industry or a sector. Sound relations at the enterprise level build trust and confidence between the workers and their management, which is the point at which the system must ultimately be effective. Let's now understand the requirements of sound industrial relations system. Employment and job security and increased employment opportunities. Raised living standards through improved terms and conditions of the employment. Productivity improvement, which enables employers to be more competitive and to increase the financial capacity to raise the living standards of the employees. Minimizing conflict, achieving harmonious relationships, resolving conflicts through peaceful means, and establishing stable social relationships. Let's study about sound labor management relations system. A sound labor management relations system is important to the removal of one of the main objectives of workers and unions to productivity drives by employers. Productivity increases have sometimes been opposed by workers and unions on the grounds that they do not result in equitable sharing of benefits to workers, and that increased productivity may lead to redundancy. Labor management relations therefore play a crucial role in securing acceptance by workers and unions of the need for productivity improvement, and also in obtaining their commitment to achieving it. Labor Management Relations Policy Formulation (LMRP) should aim at achieving social justice through a process of consensus by negotiation so as to avert adverse political, social and economic consequences. Let's now discuss about sound industrial relations system at the national and industry level. Labor Management Relations Policy formulation is one of the significant tasks at the national level, and its successful formulation and implementation can influence the labor relations climate at the industry and enterprise level. In some of the industrialized market economies, there is a greater likelihood that in developing countries of bipartite policy formulations being reflected in national policies due to the strength of the employers and the workers' organizations. The relative weakness of employers and workers' organization, or of one of them, or the inability of such organizations to agree on the fundamentals of what the labor relations policy should be, often prevents bipartisan from influencing national policy formulation. The policies and the methods of training of workers, for example, reflected what the two social partners had identified as appropriate for the industry. Now let us talk about the freedom of association. The fundamental premise of a sound industrial relations system is the recognition and the existence of the freedom of association accorded to both the employers and the workers. Observance by states of the basic principles of the International Labour Organization (ILO) Convention relating to freedom of association and protection of the right to organize number 87 in 1948 is often regarded as the yardstick by which a country's recognition of this freedom is measured. Public authorities are required to refrain from any interference which would restrict this right or impede the lawful exercise of this right. Organizations have the right to establish and to join federations and confederations which are entitled to the same rights and guarantees, and to affiliate with international organizations. Now we will have a look into tripartism and labor policy formulation. Tripartism is the process through which the foundation for a sound industrial relations system can be laid at a national level. Labor management relations policy formulation may take place and be reflected in basic agreements or codes or industrial relations charters in which all three parties in the labor relations system have participated. Tripartism as a process is a part of a pluralistic outlook on society through which stability is maintained, freedom of association being the sine qua non. Because without the right of association, the interest groups in the society cannot function effectively. As expressed by H.A. Clegg, pluralism is a theme in that men associate together to further their common interests and desires. Their associations exert pressure on each other and on the government. The concessions which follow help to bind society together. Thereafter, stability is maintained by further concessions and adjustments as new associations emerge and power shifts from one group to another. Let's analyze the role of the law. Industrial relation systems are founded on a framework of labor law which exerts an influence on the nature of the industrial relation system. The main functions of the law in an industrial relations system have been described as auxiliary, regulatory, and restrictive. The first function is the support it gives to the autonomous system of collective bargaining, its operation and observance of agreements. The second function is one of providing a set of rules governing the terms and conditions of employment and supplementing those created by the parties themselves. The greater the coverage by collective bargaining, the less will be the regulatory functions of the law. The third function prescribes what is permitted or forbidden in industrial conflict with a view to protecting the parties from each other and the public from both of them. Let's now review collective bargaining. Collective bargaining may take place at the national industry or enterprise level. It could be said that collective bargaining is a means of settling issues relating to terms and conditions of employment and has little to do with labor management relations policy formulation. For instance, arrangements and agreements resulting from collective bargaining may provide ways in which wages could be adjusted to meet increases in the cost of living, in which event they will constitute an agreed policy on this issue. Collective bargaining, in as much as it promotes democracy at the enterprise as well as at the national and the industry levels, depending at which level collective bargaining takes place, is an important aspect of a sound industrial relations system.
So many good things we all need start at the bargaining table. A decent living, time for our children, our parents, a safe place to work, a future to look forward to. When workers and employers negotiate fair contracts, they set standards that improve both union and non-union workplaces and help all Ontario families keep up. Collective bargaining works. We can't let any government take bargaining rights away.
Let's now study the nature of collective bargaining. The ILO Convention No. 98, 1949 relating to the right to organize and to bargain collectively describes collective bargaining as a voluntary negotiation between the employers or the employers' organization and the workers' organization with a view to the regulation of terms and conditions of employment by collective agreements. It is not equivalent to collective agreements because collective bargaining refers to the process or the means and collective agreement to the possible result of bargaining. Where it leads to an agreement, it modifies rather than replaces the individual contract of employment because it does not create the employer-employee relationship. It is a method used by trade unions to improve the terms and the conditions of employment of their members, often on the basis of equalizing them across industries. It is a method which restores the unequal bargaining position as between the employer and the employee. Now let's analyze some preconditions for successful collective bargaining. Support of the labor administration authorities is necessary for successive collective bargaining, and this implies that they will provide the necessary climate for it. Example, provide effective conciliation services in the event of a breakdown of the process and provide the necessary legal framework for it to operate in where necessary. Not support a party in breach of agreements concluded in consequence of collective bargaining. As far as is practicable, secure observance of collective bargaining agreements. Provide for the settlement of disputes arising from collective bargaining if the parties themselves have not so provided. Let's now learn about labor courts. Labor courts have been established in several countries because the normal systems of courts and the system of law they administer cannot adequately deal with labor relations issues which require an equitable rather than a purely legal approach. Courts and tribunals have generally not been a major factor in bringing about change in industrial relations in industrialized countries. The role of the courts would normally be limited to their powers of interpretation, which do not provide much scope to effect major changes in industrial relationships. The normal civil courts have not evinced an appreciation of labor issues, especially in Britain, where at the turn of the century, many decisions of the courts had to be reversed by legislation to enable trade unions to fulfill their role. In Germany, the Federal Labor Court has become at least as important as the legislature as far as regulations in the field of labor is concerned. We will discuss about sound labor relations at the enterprise level. In the final analysis, the quality of relationships between the employer and the employees in an enterprise depends on the policies, practices and procedures which exist at the enterprise level to deal with both the individual and the collective issues and to promote labor management cooperation. The elements of a sound industrial relations system are closely linked to a progressive human resource management policy translated into practice. Human resource management policies and practices are not central to corporate strategies, and human resource management departments are seen as only providing services to other departments Such policies and practices will remain outside the enterprise's main culture and will be a deviant culture. In the large Japanese enterprises, the manufacturer of quality products and productivity improvement have for a very long time been viewed as being dependent on the people-centered approach. Now, in the end, let us summarize what we have learned in this lecture. The industrial relations affect not merely the interest of the two participants, labor and management, but also the economic and the social goals to which the state addresses itself. The present trend in labor relations and human resource management is to place greater emphasis on the employee involvement, the harmonious employer-employee relations and mechanisms, and on practices which promote them. A pluralistic view recognizes that labor problems or issues do not relate only to conflict between the employers and the employees. In more recent times, industrial relations has been influenced by other social sciences such as organizational psychology and behavior. The establishment of a sound or a harmonious industrial relations system is a central theme for governments, employers, workers and their representatives in their endeavors to achieve economic and social development.